So I just started the recording and it still
Okay.
doesn't really affect your video.
You can't start because the host has stopped.
So now this session is being recorded. Welcome everyone. This is Charu Sharma from NextPlay. And very quick intro of what we do. So we help companies like Lyft, Square, Coca-Cola, etc. build their internal mentorship programs at scale with the goal of engaging and retaining more talent, especially diverse talent at scale. So that's what we do. And I have the privilege of working closely with Steve. He's actually one of our advisors. And I knew him through a friend through my LinkedIn days. So Steve used to be the head of HR at LinkedIn, and he took the company from 400 people to 4,000 people. So he has seen the different high growth stages of a massive company and built the culture at LinkedIn, built their values, has also seen different careers of different people and has mentored a ton of people. It's so funny. It's literally, if I'm speaking to HR leaders, a lot of times it will just come up, hey, have you spoken to Steve? Hey, Steve is my mentor. Hey, have you read this article by Steve? And it's crazy. So I wanted to acknowledge that because we're all very lucky to be getting the next 25 minutes with Steve. So I have a few questions to get us started. But if you have other questions that pop up in your mind that you want to get answered, please just type them here in the Q&A section at the bottom. So to get started, Steve, the world is changing so fast, and you talk about that in your talks. How do you see careers changing?
Okay, well, first of all, Charu, thank you so much for having me, and thank all of you for joining us and taking time from your busy worlds to engage in some thinking around the future of careers, future of work, if you will. And I think, when I look at what's happening in the world of careers right now, what I think is absolutely fascinating is that for probably the first time in history, we're facing a situation where both companies and professionals know less about the future than at any point in history. Industries are changing faster than ever before. Companies' life cycles are shorter than ever before. There's been a lot of research published recently around, the average lifespan of a company back in the 60s was around 40 years, and today it's averaging around 18 years. So companies they're not necessarily lasting as long, and some of them aren't even intending to last really long. And I think that's contributing to this new shape that people have around, well, what should I expect from work? And given that companies may not last as long, what does that mean around what prospects there are? How long should I expect to stay in a particular organization? And what does my career growth really mean? And how do I realize that? And if I talk to any leader around the world, and I spend a lot of time in Europe and South America and Canada, I think the biggest concern or the biggest question I hear from people is, well, what skills should I be building to optimize my chances of having a really great career? And that's a really tricky question to answer, because it seems like no matter what year you're asking that question, as time goes by, the answer is going to change. So the truth is, there is no one particular deep skill, I think, that we can develop that's going to give us ultimate career insurance. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so we're left with this reality where companies today don't really know the skills they're going to need in 5 to 10 years. So they can't adequately measure the exact skills that they should be hiring for or developing in people, because things are changing really fast. And that's not a knock on companies. That's just a reality of how fast things are changing. And so I think we're in this place right now where careers are involving more movement than ever before. The Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes a monthly report on the North American talent market. And they said recently that for professionals, non-farm working professionals between the ages of 25 and 35, the average tenure in an organization today, drum roll please, 2.8 years. 2.8 years in an organization. Now, for people over 50, that number is a lot higher. It's around 10 years. But think about that. That's pretty dramatic. And we're starting to see that play out while we have the gig economy growing and people have more chances to make an income outside of a regular job than ever before. We've got lots of things happening right now. And I think what we're seeing is people getting more comfortable with movement, right? And that the penalty to leave a company after 2 or 3 years is not what it used to be. You're not going to have people shake their finger and say, you're disloyal. They're sort of saying, okay, well, 3 years, that's a pretty good run, and 10 years ago, 3 years is the job hopper. And today, that's seen as a pretty substantial investment of time. So that's what probably the biggest thing I'm seeing is the fluidity and movement of talent and careers going from one organization is growing. And also, I think from industry to industry, we're seeing more movement from one into another. And people aren't saying, well, you don't know semiconductors or you don't know video game industry. Like, why are you coming into video game industry? And you're not having those questions come up as often today. So it's really interesting. And that's the element that I was talking about initially, Charu, which is this concept of both people in this party of, building a career, like an employer and an employee. Both people know less about the future than ever before. And it's creating this really interesting dynamic where people are, both sides are more fearful of the future and more unaware of what could be, that we're seeing some interesting outcomes from that.
So I'm looking at the Q&A section and I see some really great questions and it ties into what you're saying, Steve. So Madhuri wants to understand specific tips, actionable tips to grow her career. And then more relevantly to what you were saying, I think then we can segue. Denise is asking about the balance between work and purpose. Is work has generally been the means to an end, right? And now millennials especially are looking to work more and more to get meaning and identity. So how do you her question is, how do we balance work with finding purpose in other areas in life, whether it be friends, family, hobbies, and so on? And I think that's a very great question.
Yeah. And what's happening? The reason this question is coming up more and more around how do we build a whole life? And how do we integrate work with all these other passions and needs that we have filled? The reason that's becoming, I think, a hotter and hotter button, it's always been about work-life balance. And now it's even more extreme because I believe technology has created this dynamic where it's very possible where you could work 24 hours a day, that you can never turn it off. And unfortunately, they've figured out how to put Wi-Fi in airplanes. That used to be a place of refuge when you are on an airplane, like, yes, no one can connect with me. But I think that's a great question. And it's shared by a lot of people. And I think it's a very highly personal question. A lot of times when I'm speaking to MBA students, and I have a chance to do that from time to time around the world, I ask people, well, what is your goal for working? Like, why are you working? Are you working to finish first? Are you working to finish happy? And I think this notion of we're feeling a little more disconnected because we're always on and technology is always in our face and we're always have a device in our hand. I think this growing sense of there's got to be more than this is developing. And when I'm talking to organizations around how can you attract and keep people longer, it's going to have to be a lot more than just offering a job, just offering compensation. I think it's offering a community. It's offering something that people connect to. And similarly, and this is a good thing, we're seeing more and more organizations recognize that they have to be really clear on what their purpose is and how they are finding, how they're making a difference in the world and expressing that to candidates and to employees more than ever before. And that's causing people to think in different ways around what kind of business are we really in? And remember,
what about individuals, Steve? Because from the questions, I think they're looking to get, as individual professionals, they're looking to get actionable advice that they can apply in their own life. Whether it has to do with, well, how do I, as an individual, build the right skills and networks? Or how do I make career choices? How do I grow my career? What actionable advice do you have for these individuals?
Well, I think the first thing is in a reality, in a world today where we know so much less about the future than ever before, you're going to need to surround yourself with people, advisors, mentors, coaches, friends, and build almost your own personal board of directors, if you will, to really help you navigate and to ask questions. And the truth is, that, you know, if you ask me, like, what is a career? Career is really an experiment. From one company and one opportunity and one role to the next, we're learning new things about what are we good at, what do people value and what we have to offer, what kind of environments we like to work in. And so one of the specific things that I would offer to anyone is to not see that a specific job or company is an end destination, but it's a path on a longer, you know, life experiment that you have to try to find out, where are you happiest? What kind of people do you like working with? What kind of bosses do you like to have? What kind of cultures do you like to work in? And so the more research you can do in talking to people and talking to friends and getting advice, and in turn, you know, maybe changing roles and changing organizations to learn, because you don't know until you're really inside if that place is really right for you. And the great news today, with all this transparency we have through Glassdoor, through LinkedIn, through other sites, is we have lots of people telling authentic stories around what it's like to be there. And the interesting thing, and I feel incredibly lucky, I found out probably 3 years out of college what I love to do. And I got lucky. That wasn't a plan. I didn't have a particular roadmap to get there. I stumbled on human resources. I stumbled on recruiting. And I found out that I just absolutely love doing that. And then I doubled down and went and got a master's degree and said, I'm all into that. Now, for most of us, for many people, you don't get lucky early in life and you go from one to the next. I know dozens of friends, 40 plus, 50 plus, who are making big career pivots. And they're doing that by talking to other people, by, you know, questioning, you know, maybe I could apply my skills in a different way. One friend of mine, for example, was an area manager for Groupon in sales. But while they were not working, they were volunteering their time in the local school district, helping raise money for the school, finding scholarships for kids from underprivileged backgrounds to get them into school. And so he loved that. He loved doing that. And he said, you know what? I think I want to switch. And that's what I want to do. And that was really interesting to me, that his volunteer experience exposed him to something new that triggered a passion of his that he wasn't finding working at Groupon. And he was able to, you know, through some friends of mine and some friends of his, we set up some conversations, some informational interviews, and he was able to land a really exciting opportunity for himself, which was really, really great. And so that's, you know, I think a pathway that we should all recognize. And we always hear around, oh, networking and talking to people is important, but it's really important today for us to learn and to find out new ways that we could apply our skills and our talents. I also think wherever you're sitting, if you're sitting in an organization, from the day one, your relationship with your manager, you should establish a rapport that, hey, I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to make a difference. And that's constantly the narrative. It's not, hey, what are your specific actions this week, this month, this year? And you want to make sure that your development is a big part of your performance review process, whatever that looks like in your own organization, and take control of that. I think that's really important. If you want to grow your career, you cannot wait for your boss or your company to deliver on that. You have got to own that. And it used to be that was something that was sort of like, what? My company's going to take care of my career. And today it's very much the norm, I think, for people to recognize that that's on us to grow. And that's on us to build our networks. And I think those of the people on the webinar here that happen to be working in Silicon Valley, I mean, we have one of the greatest candy stores of career opportunity in the world. There, people are moving around. I mean, this 2.8 number of people 25 to 35, I would venture in Silicon Valley, that number's a lot less. It might even be sub 2. So, you know, I think we have to rethink about careers in a way that's a little bit more around experimentation.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And what you said about us being in the driver's seat is so true, because it's our life, it's our experiment, it's our career. We're the ones who have to own it and make these decisions and take these risks. So let's take a specific example. So one of the questions we just got is, there is a person, they're anonymous, I don't know their gender, so I'll use third pronoun. So they are coming from the nonprofit sector, and they want to go work at a for-profit big company and work in diversity and inclusion. So that is just taking a specific example, but then how can they go about this transition? What are some actionable tips you have for them? And, all of us can really learn because all of us are trying to, I'm not looking for a job, but, everybody is trying to grow in some way, whether it's growing within your function in your role or making a transition as a growth. But, we're all looking to change something.
Okay.
So what specific advice do you have for someone who's trying to go from nonprofit sector to a for-profit company to get into a D&I role?
Okay. So first thing I'll say, and I am actually in the process of coaching someone who's considering going from an MBA at University of San Francisco into a D&I role. They brought to the table a technology background where they're desktop support and IT services. And they said, I want to go full on in to a D&I role. And I said, do you know in a corporation how D&I roles are perceived, can be perceived? Do you know that? And they said, no, I don't. So the first advice I would have, if you're interested in a nonprofit and you want to go in a for-profit role, a D&I, is to go talk to people in those roles and hear from them what their day-to-day experiences are. Because my discussions with those people are, they're highly frustrated, they're disempowered, they're under budgeted. And so while the cause is valuable and it's noble and it's needed, not many organizations that have these roles have bought into wanting that role and funding it and getting behind it. So the advice that I've been giving to the people that I've been talking to that are interested in considering this is do what you would normally do. Go talk to people in those roles and really check, is that really what you want to do? Because you don't have to be in a D&I role to have D&I, to have the capability of making a difference in an organization around diversity and inclusion. You don't. In fact, I would argue that if you are a business leader or a professional in an organization that wants to help contribute to that in your organization, you may have a little bit more credibility as not being the D&I person, if you will. I think, unfortunately, there's a little bit of stigma with that role, and people feel that there's some guilt attached to, we have to do this because the company says it versus it's really the right thing to do. So we're going through this evolution of what's the right approach an organization should take to really develop their, a diverse workforce and one that feels more inclusive. And there's no one right way that I've seen it done. It really depends on the leadership team. It depends on the culture. So check it out, talk to a lot of people, make sure that that's really the kind of thing that you want to do. I think any organization that's hiring this role is going to want someone who can bring experience, prior experience into it. I think it's going to be hard for someone to jump into that unless they can show that they're really bringing a lot to the table. And that's not to say it won't happen, but I think if you can find a way in an organization through other means and then take on some of those responsibilities, that's a good way. And that's another point where I get asked a lot around if I want to make a career pivot, if I want to go do something different. It's easier to transition into something rather than do a full 180-degree flip into something very different, to do a full pivot. So for example, like the D&I role, if you have a skill set that you already have, whether it's project management or whether it's business development, but you also have an interest in D&I, rather than doing a 180-degree jump into D&I, find a place where you can do both. Because it's more likely that someone's going to accept you for the background and experiences that you have, and then you can tease in new experiences and new challenges in the D&I role over time and fully morph to that. Okay? As much as we'd like to believe people are willing to take chances on folks with no experience, that just doesn't happen that much. And so if you can bring...
We just got a question from Lisa Hickman asking, why does it matter how long your work experience is?
Hi, Lisa. Similar to a resume, a CV, a LinkedIn profile, the relevance of work experience really is in the eye of the beholder, okay? I think that, and this is true in business, are you gonna buy from an organization that has a new product, but it's never sold it before, or someone who's selling you something that they've been building for years and they've got a proven track record? They're less of a risk. if you do have work experience, if you do have experience in a particular discipline, you're less of a risk. And so because resources are finite and people have limited budgets, and particularly if you're in a small medium, there is no margin for error here. People want to know with a greater degree of certainty that you can deliver something. And if there's someone else who has some more experience that's done that, it's less of a risk. Now, there's always people that, hey, they're not particularly concerned with exactly the same experience. If you have similar experiences and they think that transition into this kind of work is not that big a jump, they would be open to it. But it's a great question. I mean, early in my career, I fought this, you don't have a lot of experience in this. I'm like, well, yeah, but how hard is it to learn? Come on, I can learn. And so that's the battle. If you don't have that experience, what can you do to prove that you can do something? You can prove that you've learned 7 other things over the course of your career, or that whether it's in school or whether it's in an internship or whether it was in a volunteer job, I learned something new. And the more you chalk up those wins, and this is a big part of, I believe, the future of careers, we are going to have to show with a greater degree of certainty over time that we can learn things faster and apply them quickly. That's going to differentiate you, I believe, today more than anything else. People say, Steve, what's the most important skill I should have to grow my career? The most important skill is to show that you can learn and apply quickly, lots of different things. And for me, what I'm most proud of when I look at my career is that I started in fashion. I went to insurance. I went to semiconductor. I went to networking. I worked in Asia. I worked in Canada. I worked in the games industry. I worked in professional networking. And just because I didn't have a sector experience didn't make me disqualified or disabled. In fact, I think it brought a greater degree of diversity of worldview, right? And so I think that's something that I would strongly encourage you to think about.
Now we have 2 more really good questions, Steve, and we have about 3 minutes. So do you want to take one of the 2, or do you think you can answer both?
Okay, sure. Let me try. This is like speed questions. Okay. Do you think employees are leaving every 2 or 3 years because they don't feel like they're getting training development, or are employees not investing in training development because they expect employees to leave in 2 or 3 years? The answer to that question is yes. I believe both of those are true. I think people are leaving today primarily because they think they can learn faster, something new, faster somewhere else. And this is game on for companies. You want to keep people? You almost have to promise that you're going to make them more employable for tomorrow, whether they're with you or not with you. So I see that very, very great question around that one. Okay, second one. Do you think technical transferable experience is more relevant, valuable now than before because employers expect employees to leave in 2 or 3 years, therefore they want someone who won't need to be trained? Yes, I do. I definitely think that. I think people, now, there's people that don't agree with me. Josh Burson, one of the great thought leaders in HR, believes that companies are investing more in development than ever before. I'm not seeing that yet. I agree that that's a differentiator, but if you want people to stay, they got to grow and learn. And getting people productive fast has never been more important, because it's taking a long time to find the people. And when you get them in, you got to get them going fast. I had a post on LinkedIn yesterday where I said, onboarding should start the day you talk to a candidate for the first time. That's when you're starting to onboard them, whether it works out or not. So there's this hypersensitivity to get people going quickly. Now, the other way to rethink around people not staying as long as they used to is to do what Spotify did. And those of you that haven't read the article in Fast Company about this, a few months ago, Spotify implemented a rule. You cannot stay in your job more than 2 years. Now, obviously that doesn't apply to some jobs like the CFO or the CEO, but that's a pretty radical approach that they're mandating someone can't stay. And that means you get, people trying something new. They know that they're going to be going somewhere new in a few years. It's pretty progressive. At LinkedIn, Charu, we move people around a lot. We call them career bursts. And even if they didn't change jobs, we would send someone to a different location or department for a few weeks or months, and that charged their batteries. And it gave them a chance to learn something new. Because if you're giving someone a chance to learn something new, that means there's an opportunity they're going to be smarter for tomorrow, whatever happens in your organization.
So we're almost at time, but There are two more questions, and let's do
Okay.
the rapid fire style because I think you have really valuable insights for them. So
Okay.
the
Okay.
first question is, and so very rapid fire style. The first question is, during the interviews, what are one or two things that an IC has to prove if they want a manager or team lead role?
Okay, well, it's really hard to prove that you're worthy of being a manager if you're a good IC. And by the way, being a manager may not be the right fit. And that's the biggest mistake I've seen companies make again and again and again, is put someone who is really good as an IC in a manager job, but they were not ready to be and did not want to be and are not good at being a manager. And so what I've tried to do in every organization I've been a part of is you build a success track for individual contributors that pays, rewards, recognizes individual contributor roles as much as being a manager. What I'd want to do if someone wants to be a manager and they're an IC and I'm in an interview, I want to see that they've taken their managers and their leaders and their team has seen them as a leader, has given them project work, that they have taken on managing groups of people, that they're on multiple teams, that they're demonstrating they can work vertically and horizontally in different ways with different groups, and that they thrive on that. And if they're mentoring people on the side, that they're doing leadership kinds of things above and beyond what they're normally doing. There's lots of ways of showing that. But my first answer to that question is, that's not always the right path for everybody. All right. Trust me. I've had a lot of people that thought they should be a manager because their company only values that and pays it more and recognizes it more than IC. And they failed.
And then there's one more question that was asked before, and I
Okay.
think it's very important for them to know this. So this one person has been with a bunch of companies that went through M&As.
Okay.
Sometimes the company shut down, sometimes the role was terminated or deleted, and because of this, now when they're in the job market looking for a job, recruiters keep saying no to them, but it's not their fault. How can
Right.
they position themselves in the job market?
Well, listen, this is happening to so many people, right? You're going to be a victim of your circumstances sometimes. And that's just short-sighted. You don't want to work on those places if they don't see that, right? It wasn't your choice necessarily. As I said earlier, I believe the penalty and the stigma of leaving somewhere is less than it used to be. But make sure you're calling that out in your CV or resume, LinkedIn profile that, this job was phased out as a result of the acquisition, right? And that's unfortunate. Like, I know people, I have family, friends that have been victimized by, the roadkill of an M&A, and they're like, they wanted to cut that out. And that's hard to predict when you're going somewhere. People won't tell you, yeah, we're likely to get acquired in a few months and your job's probably going to be eliminated. They're never going to tell you that. So that's hard. But you're not alone if you're in that situation. And what I would try to do is just keep going. This is a numbers game. It's a numbers game. The more times you go out there, the more chances you get, you're going to find that right opportunity for you. And you're going to find a boss who's been in the same situation you were. They were in an M&A, they lost their job, and they can relate to you. Try to find those people. Look for those roles where there's people from M&As that are going to get the reality that you've been through and not see that as a bad thing.
That's really good advice. So I know we're a bit over time, but is there any final piece of advice you want us to walk away with?
I think I'm going to just harp on something I said earlier, which is I think we should all see our careers as experiments, and from one role and opportunity to the next, we should be learning more around what we're good at, what people value, what we like doing, what kind of cultures we want to be in. Do we like smaller companies, bigger companies, international companies, family-owned companies, global companies, companies in the service business? I mean, there's so much infinite choice out there, and gather intelligence from people working in those places to try to find a place where you find that harmony of, I really like doing this. I have a life that's full beyond just work, right? And that, it's never just about the salary. It's about the whole package. Do I have freedom? Do people listen to my input? Do I like my commute? Do I like my boss? Do I like how I'm able to dress at work? There's so many other elements that go into making you happy and allowing you to grow than just what the dollar is. And I find a lot of people obsess on a salary for the wrong reasons when there's so much more to it.
Thank you. So
okay.
This is great. I already see comments from individuals saying this was excellent. Thank you for the great advice. So this is awesome. And thank you for offering to do another webinar in a few weeks, specifically for HR folks and D&I folks
Sure.
on how they can advance their careers and how they can build the right policies for their companies. So those of you who are in the talent space, please stay tuned for that webinar. We'll find some time on Steve's very busy calendar and do that again soon. But thank you everyone for joining, and have a wonderful Tuesday ahead.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Steve. Bye.
Bye, Chiru.